On my birthday, my daughter-in-law whispered to my son, "I'll distract her. You go to her house and change the locks." When he came back, he froze and gasped. Something went wrong. "My name is Eleanor Ashford. I'm 72 years old, and I've lived in this house for 47 years. 3 weeks ago, I told my son Robert I was leaving everything to the Historical Society." His face went white. That night, I heard him and Clara fighting through the walls. "Then we make her change it back," she'd said, "one way or another." 2 weeks before my birthday, I forgot my reading glasses in the powder room. When I went back, I heard Clara on her phone in the hallway. "We just need her out of the house for a few hours. That's all." Her voice was low, businesslike. "Her birthday lunch. She'll be at the restaurant for hours. We change the locks, secure the documents, and it's done." I stood frozen behind the door, barely breathing. They were planning something, and I wasn't going to let them get away with it. I didn't confront them. I watched instead. Over the next 2 weeks, Robert kept asking questions about my security system. Clara left estate planning websites open on her laptop. They'd go silent when I walked into rooms, their conversations dying mid-sentence. I saw them exchange looks across the dinner table. Late at night, I heard them arguing in the driveway. They thought I was old and oblivious. They were wrong. So I made my own plan. The morning of my birthday, I called Margaret, my caregiver, my friend of 7 years. "Stay home today," I told her. "Don't come to the restaurant." She protested, but I insisted. "If anyone comes to the house, call me immediately. Don't let them inside." There was a pause. Margaret knew me well enough not to ask questions. "I'll keep watch," she said quietly. I hung up feeling clever. Margaret was my witness, my proof, my insurance policy. The birthday lunch at Bella Vista was pure theater. 20 relatives, white tablecloths, champagne catching the afternoon light. But my mind was 3 miles away at my house. Clara orchestrated every delay, waiting for the perfect table, ordering wine from the cellar, arranging flowers for photos. She was buying time. Robert sat beside me, knee bouncing, checking his watch every few minutes. I smiled and sipped champagne, waiting for Margaret to call. Then Robert stood abruptly. "Work call," he muttered, already pulling out his phone. Through the window, I watched him pace the parking lot, running his hand through his hair over and over. My phone sat dark on the tablecloth. I stared at it. 15 minutes passed, 20, 30. Why wasn't Margaret calling? The conversation buzzed around me. Clara kept glancing toward the parking lot, her smile growing tighter. 45 minutes. Where was he? When Robert finally returned, his face was ash gray. Sweat gleamed on his forehead despite the air conditioning. His collar was damp, his hands shaking as he reached for his water. Clara leaned in close, gripping his arm. "What happened?" she whispered urgently. "Why did it take so long?" Robert's eyes met hers, and I saw it. Pure terror. Something had gone catastrophically wrong. Robert leaned closer to Clara, and I heard him whisper 2 words. "Something went wrong." Clara's smile faltered for just a second before she forced it back. She turned to me, touching my arm. "Eleanor, you look pale. Are you feeling all right?" I looked at my son and saw the guilt written across his face. The panic, the fear. My phone hadn't rung because Margaret couldn't call. I knew it the way mothers know things. Whatever he'd gone to do, Margaret had gotten in the way. The rest of the lunch passed in a blur. I cut cake, smiled for photos, thanked people for gifts I didn't see. Clara kept trying to extend things. Dessert wine, coffee, more photos. She was stalling, keeping me away from the house. Finally, I stood. "I need to go home." Robert jumped up. "Let me follow you, Mom." But I couldn't look at him. "No," I said. "I'll be fine." I drove home through the twilight, hands white-knuckled on the wheel, praying I was wrong. But when I pulled into my driveway, I saw Margaret's car still parked under the oak tree. I tried my key. It didn't fit. Robert had changed the locks. I called a locksmith, pacing, calling Margaret's phone. It rang and rang. 20 minutes later, the locksmith let me in. I walked through the dark house, my heart pounding. Then I found her, Margaret, crumpled at the bottom of the back staircase, her neck twisted wrong, her phone shattered beside her. And I understood. I'd set a trap to catch my son's betrayal. Margaret had died in it. I excused myself to the restroom, my legs barely steady. Inside the cramped stall, I pulled out my phone and called Margaret again. It rang once, twice, 3 times. Then voicemail. Her cheerful recorded voice, "You've reached Margaret Hartley. Please leave a message." I hung up and called again. Same result. My hands were shaking. She always answered. Always. I stood at the bathroom mirror, gripping the cold porcelain sink. The woman staring back at me looked older than 72. My lipstick was smudged. My hands wouldn't stop trembling. What had Robert done? The question pounded in my skull like a heartbeat. I splashed cold water on my face and forced myself to breathe. Maybe Margaret's phone had died. Maybe she'd fallen asleep. Maybe I was overreacting. When I returned to the table, Robert was staring at his plate, pushing food around with his fork. He wouldn't look at me. Clara was laughing too loud at someone's joke, her voice pitched high and artificial. She kept touching people, a hand on someone's arm, a pat on someone's shoulder. Overcompensating. I sat down slowly, watching them both. "I'm not feeling well," I announced. "Perhaps we should cut the cake early." Clara's smile froze. "Oh, but Eleanor, we haven't had the main course yet, and I ordered that special dessert you love from the pastry chef." Her voice was desperate, pleading. "Just another hour, please?" I looked at her carefully arranged face and saw the panic underneath. She was buying time, keeping me here. "I really think I need to go home," I said firmly. Robert finally looked up, his face pale. "Mom's right. If she's not feeling well," Clara cut him off. "Just the cake, then. 5 minutes." The restaurant staff wheeled out the cake, a towering confection with 72 candles flickering in the dim light. Everyone gathered around, phones out, cameras flashing. They sang happy birthday while I sat frozen, staring at the flames. "Make a wish," they urged. I closed my eyes and wished with everything in me. Let Margaret be alive. Let me be wrong. Please. I blew out the candles and the room erupted in applause. I forced myself to cut the first slice, smiled for photos, thanked people for gifts I couldn't even see. Every second felt like an hour. Clara kept trying to start new conversations, offering more wine, suggesting we order coffee. Finally, I stood abruptly, nearly knocking over my chair. "I'm sorry, I really must go." The room went quiet. Robert and Clara exchanged a look, quick, loaded with meaning. "Of course," Clara said quietly, "we understand." In the parking lot, Robert caught up with me as I fumbled with my car keys. "Mom, let me follow you home. Make sure you get there safe." His voice was urgent, almost pleading. I couldn't look at him. If I looked at him, I'd see whatever he'd done written on his face. "No, Robert, I'll be fine." He grabbed my arm gently. "Please." "I insist." I pulled away. I said no. Something in my tone made him step back. I drove home through streets I'd known for decades, but they felt foreign now. Every red light was torture. I ran 2 of them, not caring. My phone sat in the passenger seat, silent and accusing. I kept glancing at it, willing it to ring. At one stoplight, I tried calling Margaret one more time. Voicemail again. I threw the phone down and pressed the accelerator, my heart hammering against my ribs. When I pulled into my driveway, the house loomed dark against the evening sky. No lights on. Margaret always left the porch light on for me. Her car was still parked under the oak tree where it had been this morning. That was good, wasn't it? She was home. She was fine. I was just being paranoid. I walked to the front door, key in hand, slid it into the lock. It didn't turn. I tried again, jiggling it. Nothing. The lock had been changed. I ran around to the back door, my heels catching on the flagstones. That lock was new, too. Fresh scratches around the deadbolt where someone had worked quickly. "Margaret!" I shouted, pounding on the door. "Margaret, are you in there?" Silence. I pulled out my phone with shaking hands and called her again. Through the door, I heard it, faint and muffled, her ringtone playing somewhere inside the house. She was in there, her phone was ringing. But she wasn't answering. And I knew. God help me, I knew. I called the locksmith with trembling fingers. "I've locked myself out," I lied, my voice somehow steady. "I need someone immediately." He said 45 minutes. I offered double. 20 minutes, he promised. I hung up and stood on my own porch like a stranger. Margaret's phone had stopped ringing inside. The silence was worse than the sound. I tried the windows, the side door, every entry point, everything locked. Robert had been thorough. The locksmith arrived in 18 minutes. A middle-aged man with kind eyes who made small talk while he drilled out the new lock. "Good quality hardware," he commented. "Expensive, someone cares about your security." I handed him cash and a $100 tip. "Thank you, please go now." He looked surprised but packed up quickly. I watched his van disappear down the street before I touched the door handle. My hand was shaking so badly I could barely turn it. The house exhaled stale air when I opened the door. "Margaret?" My voice echoed off the hardwood floors. I stepped inside, every instinct screaming at me to run, to get back in my car and drive away and never know for certain. But I've never been a coward. I walked through the foyer, past the living room, through the kitchen, where we'd had coffee that morning. Her mug was still in the sink. Everything looked normal, untouched. The back hallway was dark. I flipped the light switch, and there she was. Margaret lay crumpled at the bottom of the servants' staircase, her body bent at angles that weren't possible for the living. Her eyes were open, staring at nothing. Her phone lay beside her, screen shattered into a spider web of cracks, frozen on 3 numbers, 9 to 1 minus 1. She'd tried to call for help. Someone had stopped her. A sound came out of me, not quite a scream, not quite a sob. Something animal. I dropped to my knees beside her, the impact jarring my bones. Her hand was cold. So cold. How long had she been lying here? How long had I been smiling and cutting cake while Margaret died alone? I touched her cheek. Her skin felt like wax. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "Margaret, I'm so sorry." That's when I saw the bruises. Dark purple marks circling her throat like a necklace. Thumbprints. Someone's hands had been around her neck. I looked closer, forcing myself to see. Her neck was twisted wrong, the angle too sharp. This wasn't a fall. Someone had strangled her, and when that wasn't enough, they'd snapped her neck. Quick, efficient, final. I stood on shaking legs and looked around the hallway. Nothing was disturbed. No sign of a struggle. No overturned furniture or scattered belongings. Just Margaret's body and her broken phone. I walked to the back door, the one with the fresh scratches around the new lock. That's when I saw it. A single leather glove, half hidden under the hall table, brown leather, expensive, monogrammed with 2 letters, Raw Robert Ashford. My son's glove. I picked it up with numb fingers. It was still warm. I stared at it, this piece of evidence sitting in my palm. My son had been here. My son had changed these locks. My son had left this behind when he— No. I couldn't finish the thought. But I had to. Margaret was dead. Robert had been here. And now Robert's glove was in my hand, still carrying the heat of his body. I should have called the police right then. Should have told them everything. The overheard phone call, the planned trap, Robert's presence here, the glove, but I didn't. Instead, I tucked the glove into my coat pocket, felt its weight there like a stone, like guilt. Then I pulled out my phone and dialed 911. "My name is Eleanor Ashford," I said, my voice hollow. "I've just come home to find my caregiver dead." The operator asked questions. I answered mechanically. Address, condition. "No, I didn't see what happened. No, I don't know who could have done this." I sat on the bottom step, careful not to touch Margaret's body, and waited for the sirens. The house was so quiet. I could hear the old grandfather clock ticking in the study, the hum of the refrigerator, the sound of my own breathing. And I thought about this morning, when I'd called Margaret and told her to stay home, when I'd set my trap, when I'd been so clever, so strategic, so certain I could outsmart them. I'd wanted proof of Robert's betrayal. Instead, I'd gotten proof of something far worse. I'd orchestrated this. I'd put Margaret here. I'd killed her just as surely as if I'd put my own hands around her throat. The police arrived with lights, but no sirens. 2 patrol officers first, then detectives, then the medical examiner. They photographed Margaret from every angle, measured distances, took notes. Detective Hayes sat with me in the living room, while crime scene techs worked in the hallway. "Mrs. Ashford, was anything stolen?" she asked gently. I looked around. Everything was exactly where it should be. "Nothing," I said. "Nothing's missing." "Did Margaret have any enemies? Anyone who might want to hurt her?" Detective Hayes's pen was poised over her notebook. "I thought about telling her everything. The overheard phone call, Robert's questions about security, the trap I'd set. Instead, I said, "None that I know of. Everyone loved Margaret." Another lie to add to the growing pile. The detective made a note. "We'll figure this out," she promised. I nodded and said nothing. Robert and Clara arrived at 9 the next morning, right after the police finished their second sweep. I heard the BMW pull up, heard Clara's voice calling my name. I opened the door before they could knock. Robert's face was a masterpiece. Red eyes, pale skin, trembling lips. He pulled me into a hug. "Mom," he whispered into my hair, "I'm so sorry." Sorry for what exactly? For killing Margaret? Or for getting caught in whatever he'd done? I stood rigid in his arms. He smelled like cologne and something underneath. Sweat, fear, guilt. He was shaking, actually shaking. Clara hovered behind him, dabbing at dry eyes with a tissue. "We came as soon as we heard," she said. "The police called Robert this morning. I pulled away from my son and looked into his eyes, searching for some flicker of the boy I'd raised. All I saw was terror." We sat in the living room. Clara perched on the sofa edge, hands twisting in her lap. Robert paced exactly like he used to when he was a child caught in a lie. "Have the police said anything?" he asked. "Do they have any leads?" His voice cracked on the last word. "Not yet," I said, watching his face. "They think someone broke in, surprised Margaret." I paused. Strange, though. Nothing was taken. Clara leaned forward. "Nothing stolen? Then what were they after?" Her voice was too high, too urgent. I let the question hang for a moment. "I don't know, Clara. Maybe Margaret just got in the way." Robert stopped pacing, went very still. "The police said she was trying to call 911 when it happened," I continued calmly. "Her phone was right there beside her. Shattered." Robert's hands clenched into fists at his sides. "God, that's awful," Clara said. But she was watching Robert, not me. They must have been desperate. Violent. She stood abruptly. "Eleanor, have you thought about staying somewhere else? What if they come back?" Robert finally spoke. "Mom, Clara's right. You shouldn't be here alone." His relief was visible when I said the police believed it was a burglary. He thought I didn't know. Thought he'd gotten away with it. They stayed for an hour, offering help with funeral arrangements, asking careful questions about the investigation. When they finally left, I watched from the window as they walked to their car. They were arguing. Clara grabbed Robert's arm, pulled him close, hissed something I couldn't hear. Robert's shoulders slumped. He nodded, defeated. Then they drove away, and I was alone with my lies and my dead caregiver and my son's glove hidden in my coat. I went to the study and pulled up the security footage again. 2:47 p.m. Robert's car in the driveway. He gets out with a toolkit. 2:51 p.m. He starts working on the back door lock. 3:02 p.m. Margaret's car pulls in. She gets out, sees him. Her face changes from confusion to alarm. 3:04 p.m. She walks toward him. They talk. She reaches for her phone. 3:06 p.m. Robert lunges. They disappear inside. 3:23 p.m. Robert emerges alone, hair disheveled, jacket gone. 16 minutes. That's how long it took my son to kill Margaret. I watched it 3 more times, memorizing every detail. Then I checked Robert's phone records. My private investigator had access to everything. There it was, a text from Clara at 2:30 p.m., right before he left the restaurant. "Hurry, we're running out of time. Do whatever it takes." I stared at those 4 words. Do whatever it takes. Clara had given him permission, and Robert had followed through. Margaret's funeral was on a gray Thursday at St. Catherine's Church. I sat in the front pew, veiled, surrounded by her family. Her sister Patricia sat 3 rows back, her eyes burning holes in my head. The priest spoke about Margaret's kindness, her devotion, her life of service. She dedicated herself to helping others, right up until the very end, he said. I closed my eyes. Yes, right up until my son strangled her. After the service, people approached with condolences, empty phrases meant to comfort. "She loved working for you. What a tragedy. At least she didn't suffer." But she had suffered in those final minutes when Robert's hands closed around her throat, when she realized she was going to die. She had suffered. And I had put her there. Patricia finally approached, her face carved from stone. "She died protecting your house," she said coldly. "I hope you can live with that." At the cemetery, I stood apart from the family. Robert and Clara approached, but I couldn't look at them. Robert tried to touch my arm. "Mom, let us drive you home." I pulled away. "I need to be alone." Clara's voice was concerned, practiced. "We're worried about you." I finally looked at her. This woman who'd texted my son, who'd told him to do whatever it takes. "I'm fine," I said, but I wasn't fine. I was drowning. That night, I sat in Margaret's room. Her clothes still hung in the closet. Her book sat on the nightstand, bookmark halfway through. Photos of her grandchildren smiled from the dresser. I picked up her knitting, an unfinished scarf in soft blue wool for her grandson's birthday. She'd never finish it now. I held it against my chest and finally let myself cry. Not just for Margaret, for what I'd done, for what I'd become. I pulled out my phone and texted Patricia. "I'm so sorry. Margaret was family to me. I've established a fund in her name for her grandchildren's education. I attached the bank transfer. $50,000, blood money that would never bring Margaret back. Then I called my private investigator. Tell me everything," I said. "I need to know how deep they've fallen." Robert's business had collapsed 8 months ago, bankruptcy looming. Clara had maxed out 4 credit cards. They were drowning in debt. "There's more," the investigator said. 6 months ago, your son took out a life insurance policy on you. $1 million. He's the primary beneficiary. The phone nearly slipped from my hand. "Say that again." "Life insurance. $1 million. Taken out last March. Right after I announced I was donating the house to the Historical Society. They hadn't been planning to lock me out. They'd been planning to kill me." I sat on Margaret's bed, surrounded by her things, and finally understood. Margaret wasn't the target. She was collateral damage, an accident, a complication. I was the target. My son had been planning my murder, and Margaret had died in my place. The changed locks weren't about locking me out, they were about locking me in. For what? An accident? A fall? A house fire? Whatever they'd planned, Margaret had interrupted it. I pulled Robert's glove from where I'd hidden it in my drawer. Soft brown leather, monogrammed, still carrying the memory of his hand. Evidence, proof, a confession waiting to be told. But if I turned it in, the police would investigate. They'd ask why Margaret was at the house. They'd discover I'd told her to stay. They'd see the trap I'd set. I could be charged as an accessory. At minimum, everyone would know the truth. I'd killed Margaret just as surely as Robert had. But if I stayed silent, Margaret's death meant nothing. Robert would walk free. Clara would spend the insurance money she'd been counting on. They'd try again. Maybe succeed next time. I held the glove and Margaret's unfinished scarf, weighing justice against guilt, revenge against complicity. Then I called my attorney. "Richard, I need to see you. It's urgent, not about the will, about something else, something far more dangerous, a plan forming in my mind. Dark, calculated, final." I made my decision in Margaret's room, surrounded by the life I'd ended. I couldn't bring her back, couldn't undo the trap I'd set. But I could make sure her death had meaning. I would make Robert confess, not to the police, but to me. I would hear him admit what he'd done, why he'd done it, what he'd been planning for me. And then I would destroy him, not with evidence or police reports, with something far more devastating. I would use the one weapon I had that he couldn't defend against, a mother's knowledge of her sons, every weakness, every fear, every guilty secret. I would dismantle him piece by piece until there was nothing left but the truth. I invited Robert to dinner 3 days after the funeral. Just the 2 of us. "I need to talk about the will," I told him on the phone. "There are things we need to discuss." He agreed immediately, his voice eager, relieved. He thought I was finally ready to forgive him, to move past Margaret's death, to pretend everything was normal again. He had no idea this was an interrogation. He arrived at 7 with a bottle of wine, my favorite Bordeaux, the same one we'd opened at his wedding. "Peace offering," he said with a weak smile. He looked terrible, unshaven, shadows under his eyes, clothes rumpled. He wasn't sleeping. Good. I let him kiss my cheek, let him think this was reconciliation. I'd made his favorite, pot roast with roasted vegetables, the kind of meal a mother makes for her child. We ate in the dining room where we'd shared 1,000 meals. Robert ate hungrily, his shoulders gradually relaxing. He thought the worst was over, thought he'd gotten away with it. I poured him more wine and watched him drink. "I've been having nightmares," I said softly, "about Margaret, about that day." Robert's fork paused halfway to his mouth. "That's normal, Mom. You found her. That's traumatic." I looked down at my plate. I keep thinking, what if I'd been home that day? What if I'd come back from lunch early? Could I have stopped it? My voice cracked perfectly. Robert set down his fork and reached across the table. "Mom, don't do that to yourself. It's not your fault." But his hand was trembling. "Isn't it?" I looked up at him. "I told her to stay home, Robert. I told her not to come to the restaurant." Robert went very still. "Why would you do that?" His voice was careful, controlled. I shrugged. "I don't know. I just had a feeling. Something felt off that day." I watched his face pale. If I hadn't told her to stay, she would have been with us. She'd still be alive. Robert stood abruptly, walked to the sideboard, poured himself whiskey with shaking hands. "You can't think like that. You couldn't have known." I let the silence stretch, let him drink, let him think about what I'd just said. Then I leaned forward. "Robert, I need to know the truth. Were you at the house that day?" He froze with the glass halfway to his lips. "What?" His voice was barely a whisper. "The police asked me about the locks, the new locks. You said you were changing them as a surprise." I kept my tone gentle, curious. "Were you there when Margaret came home?" Robert turned to face me, and I saw the war happening behind his eyes, the lies he'd rehearsed fighting with the truth that wanted out. "I was changing the locks," he said finally. "I told you that. It was supposed to be a birthday surprise." He drained his whiskey, poured another. "I wanted to upgrade your security, make you safer." The irony of those words hung in the air between us. Safer. From what? From him? "And Margaret?" I asked softly. "Did you see her?" Robert's hand tightened around his glass. For a long moment, he said nothing, just stared at the amber liquid like it held answers. "Robert?" My voice was patient, understanding. A mother waiting for her son to tell the truth. "Did you see Margaret that day?" His shoulders started shaking. First just a tremor, then full body shakes. The glass slipped from his hand, crashed to the floor. "I didn't mean to," he whispered. The words came out strangled, broken. "God, Mom, I didn't mean to." He slid down the wall, sat on the floor amid the broken glass and spilled whiskey. "She came home early. I was at the back door and she pulled up and she saw me." His hands covered his face. She started asking questions. What was I doing? Why didn't you know? Why was I sneaking around? I stood slowly, walked to him, knelt beside my son. "What happened then?" My voice was gentle, coaxing. Robert looked up at me with red, swollen eyes. She reached for her phone. She was going to call the police. I just wanted her to stop, Mom. I just needed her to be quiet." His voice broke. I grabbed her, just to stop her. But she fought back and my hands were on her throat, and then she stopped moving. The confession hung between us. My son, a murderer. And I, the woman who'd made it possible. Robert collapsed against me, sobbing into my shoulder like he used to when he was a child. Deep, wrenching sobs that shook his whole body. "It happened so fast," he choked out. "I didn't think. I didn't plan it. She was there, and she wouldn't stop, and I panicked." I held him, stroked his hair, and felt absolutely nothing. No maternal warmth, no instinct to protect him, just cold, hard calculation. "Tell me everything," I said softly. Robert pulled back, wiping his face with his sleeve. "I was working on the lock. It was taking longer than I thought. Then I heard her car. I froze, thought maybe she'd just go inside through the front. But she saw me." He was talking faster now, the words tumbling out. "She came over, asking what I was doing. I tried to explain, told her it was a surprise for you." "Did she believe you?" I asked. Robert shook his head. "She said she was calling you. Pulled out her phone. I told her to wait to let me explain first. But she wouldn't listen." His hands clenched into fists in his lap. She kept saying she had to tell you, had to make sure you were safe, like I was the threat, like I would hurt you. The irony was almost funny. Margaret had been right. He was the threat. So you stopped her, I said. Not a question. Robert nodded miserably. I grabbed her arm, just to stop her from dialing. But she screamed and tried to pull away. We struggled. I don't even remember. 1 second we were fighting over the phone, the next my hands were around her throat. He looked at his hands like they belonged to someone else. She made this sound, this awful gasping sound, and then nothing. I asked the question that had been burning in my mind since I found her body. Did you know she'd be there? Did you know I told her to stay home? Robert's eyes widened. What? No, I thought she was with you at lunch. I thought the house would be empty. He grabbed my hands desperately. Mom, I swear, I never wanted anyone to get hurt. If I'd known she was there, I would have waited, done it another day. Ice spread through my veins. He didn't know. He had no idea I'd sent Margaret there deliberately, that I'd used her as bait in my trap. The guilt crashed over me again, fresh and suffocating. I'd killed Margaret just as surely as if I'd strangled her myself. I reached across and took Robert's hand, squeezed it gently. I believe you, I said. Relief flooded his face. He thought I'd forgiven him, thought we could move past this together. But Robert, I said gently, you need to do the right thing now. You need to turn yourself in. Margaret deserves justice. His relief evaporated instantly. What? No, Mom, no. I can't go to prison. My life will be over. He stood abruptly, pacing. Clara will leave me. I'll lose everything. And for what? It was an accident. She's already dead. Turning myself in won't bring her back. I stood too, my voice hardening. Your life? Margaret's life is already over. Because of you. Robert whirled on me. Because I panicked. Because I made a mistake. His voice rose to a shout. I'm your son. Doesn't that mean anything? I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw a stranger. It means everything, I said quietly, which is why this is killing me, because you're my son. And you're a murderer. Don't, Robert whispered. Please, Mom, don't say that. It was an accident, but we both knew better. Accidents don't leave bruises. Accidents don't snap necks. If you don't turn yourself in, I said, I will. Robert's face went white. You wouldn't. You wouldn't do that to your own son. I met his eyes. For Margaret? Yes, I would. He stared at me for a long moment, then turned and walked out. Didn't say goodbye, didn't look back. After the door closed, I sat alone in the dining room, the dinner table still set, his half-eaten pot roast growing cold. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone, stopped the recording. His confession was there, every word of it, preserved in digital amber. Inadmissible in court, probably. He hadn't known I was recording. But I had it. The truth in his own words. Insurance, leverage, proof. I listened to it once, his voice tinny through the speaker. My hands were around her throat, and then she stopped moving. Then I saved it to 3 different locations and sat in the darkness, wondering what kind of mother uses her son's confession as a weapon. Wondering what kind of mother I'd become. Wondering if Margaret would think this was justice, or just another manipulation in a game that had already cost her everything. I listened to the recording alone that night, sitting in the dark study with headphones on. Robert's voice filled my ears, my hands were around her throat, and then she stopped moving. I played it 3 times, memorizing every pause, every crack in his voice, every sob. This was proof, confession. Evidence that could put him away for life. All I had to do was take it to Detective Hayes. But I didn't. I sat there with my finger hovering over her number and couldn't press call. Because if I turned in the recording, they'd investigate. They'd ask why I was recording my son. They'd want to know what prompted his confession. And eventually, they'd ask the question I couldn't answer. Why was Margaret at the house that day? Did you tell her to be there? Did you know Robert was coming? I called my private investigator instead. I need everything on Robert's finances. His debts, his business, his assets, everything. Within 48 hours, the report arrived. Robert was $340,000 in debt. His business had collapsed 8 months ago. Creditors were circling. He had 3 months before bankruptcy. The numbers painted a picture of desperation, of a man drowning who'd grab onto anything, anyone, to save himself. But there was more. The investigator had found emails between Robert and 3 different attorneys, all dated before my birthday. They'd been researching how to contest my will, how to prove I was mentally incompetent, how to have me declared unfit to manage my own affairs. The changed locks weren't the end of their plan. They were the beginning. Lock me out, lock me in, then what? An accident? A fall? The life insurance policy suddenly made perfect sense. I drove to Margaret's sister's house the next morning. Patricia answered the door, her face hardening when she saw me. "What do you want?" I held out an envelope. "This is for Margaret's grandchildren, for their education." She opened it, saw the check for $50,000, and her expression shifted from anger to confusion. "I don't understand." "Margaret deserved better than she got," I said. "This doesn't fix anything, but maybe it helps." Patricia stared at the check, tears welling in her eyes. "Why?" she asked. "Why are you doing this?" "Because I killed your sister," I wanted to say. "Because I set a trap and she died in it. Because guilt has a price tag and I'm trying to pay it, even though we both know I never can." Instead, I said, "Because she mattered. Because she deserved more than one more day." Patricia hugged me, and I stood there stiff and cold, accepting comfort I didn't deserve. That night, I made my decision. I wouldn't turn in the recording. It would expose me as much as it would condemn Robert. But I wouldn't let him walk free either. I would force his hand. Make him confess publicly on his own terms, crushed by his own guilt. I called an anonymous tip line. "You should look into Robert Ashford's finances. He's deeply in debt. His mother recently changed her will, cutting him out. Check the security footage from businesses near Eleanor Ashford's house on the day of the murder." Then I called Robert. He answered on the first ring. "Mom?" His voice was desperate, pleading. "The police called me today," I said calmly. "They found new evidence. They're reopening the investigation." Silence on the other end. "They want to question you again. Something about fingerprints on Margaret's phone. And traffic cameras." I heard him breathing, fast and shallow. "Robert, are you there?" "I'm here." His voice was barely a whisper. "Mom, you have to help me. You have to tell them it was an accident, that I was there but I didn't—" "What do you want me to say, Robert? That you didn't kill her?" "We both know that's a lie." Another silence. Then, "You're really going to let them arrest me? Your own son?" I thought about Margaret lying at the bottom of the stairs, about the bruises on her throat, about the life insurance policy he'd taken out on me. "Yes," I said, "I am." I hung up before he could respond, sat in the darkness with the recording still on my phone, Margaret's unfinished scarf on my lap and the weight of what I'd set in motion pressing down on me. Tomorrow, the police would follow up on the anonymous tip. They'd find Robert's car on traffic cameras. They'd match his fingerprints to Margaret's phone. They'd discover his motive, and Robert would have a choice: confess and maybe get manslaughter, or fight and face murder one. Either way, Margaret's death would mean something, even if justice came wrapped in my own manipulation, even if I could never admit my role in her death, even if I was just as guilty as my son. They arrested Robert 3 days later. I was standing at my bedroom window when the police cars pulled up to his house across town. I'd been watching his location on my phone. I saw them lead him out in handcuffs, his head down, while Clara screamed on the lawn. She was crying, begging them to wait, that there'd been a mistake. But there was no mistake, just consequences finally catching up to choices made in panic and greed. The arraignment was swift. Robert pleaded not guilty, his attorney arguing the evidence was circumstantial. Yes, his fingerprints were on Margaret's phone, but he'd been to his mother's house dozens of times. Yes, traffic cameras placed him near the house that day. But he'd already admitted to being there, changing locks. Yes, he had financial motive, but desperate men don't always become killers. The judge set bail at $2 million. Robert couldn't make it. I attended every hearing, sat in the front row of the courtroom gallery, spine straight, face expressionless. People would turn to look at me, the grieving employer, the betrayed mother. They probably wondered why I was there. Morbid curiosity, seeking closure. They didn't know I was there to watch my son pay for what we'd both done, that my presence was both witness and penance. Robert saw me at the second hearing. Our eyes met across the courtroom, and he mouthed silently, "Mom, please, help me." His face was gaunt, desperate. Prison was destroying him already, the confident businessman replaced by a hollow-eyed stranger. I stared back at him until he looked away. I had nothing to give him, no comfort, no rescue, just the cold accountability he'd spent 43 years avoiding. Clara cornered me outside the courthouse after that hearing. She grabbed my arm, her manicured nails digging into my skin. "You did this," she hissed. "You turned him in. What kind of mother destroys her own son?" I looked at her calmly, this woman who'd texted "do whatever it takes," who'd planned my death with spreadsheets and insurance policies. "I didn't destroy him, Clara. He did this to himself, the moment he put his hands around Margaret's throat." The trial began in November, 6 months after Margaret's death. The prosecution laid out their case methodically, the fingerprints on Margaret's phone, frozen on 9:1-1. Traffic camera footage placing Robert's car at my house between 2:45 and 3:25 p.m. The changed locks Robert had installed without my knowledge. Phone records showing Clara's text, "Do whatever it takes," and the motive, Robert's catastrophic debt, and my changed will that left him with nothing. On the third day, they called me to testify. I walked to the stand in my black dress, the same one I'd worn to Margaret's funeral, placed my hand on the Bible and swore to tell the truth. The prosecutor was gentle. "Mrs. Ashford, can you tell us about your relationship with Margaret Hartley?" I described 7 years of companionship, trust, friendship, made sure the jury saw her as human, as someone who'd mattered. "Did you ask Margaret to be at your home on the day she died?" the prosecutor asked. The courtroom went silent. This was the question I'd been dreading, the one that would expose everything. "Yes," I said quietly. "I asked her to stay home that day and rest." "Why?" I met Robert's eyes across the room. I had a feeling something might happen. I wanted someone there. Not a lie, but not the whole truth either. The defense attorney stood for cross-examination. "Mrs. Ashford, you had a feeling something might happen. What kind of feeling?" I kept my voice steady. My son had been asking unusual questions about my security system. My daughter-in-law seemed very interested in my estate planning. I thought they might try to access the house while I was out. "So you used Margaret as bait?" he pressed. The words hung in the air. "I asked her to call me if anyone came by," I said. "I never imagined—" My voice broke perfectly. Then the defense played their trump card. "Your Honor, I'd like to enter Exhibit 47. A recording started playing through the courtroom speakers. My voice. "Robert, were you at the house that day?" Robert's voice. "I was changing the locks." Then my question, the one that proved I'd known, suspected, planned, and Margaret? "Did you see her?" The defense attorney looked at me. "Mrs. Ashford, you recorded your son without his knowledge. You already suspected him of murder. And yet you never went to the police with this recording. Why?" I sat there, trapped by my own manipulations, and had no answer I could give. Robert had been recording too. And now we were both exposed. The son who killed, and the mother who orchestrated it all. The jury took 4 hours to reach a verdict. Guilty of second-degree murder. The judge sentenced Robert to 25 years to life. I sat in the gallery and watched my son crumble as they read the sentence. He turned to look at me one last time, tears streaming down his face, mouthing words I couldn't hear. Or maybe I just chose not to. I stood and walked out of the courtroom without looking back. Outside, reporters shouted questions I didn't answer. I drove home in silence. The house was exactly as I'd left it. Empty, quiet. Margaret's room was still closed, her belongings untouched. I walked through each room like a ghost haunting her own life. The living room where Robert had confessed. The dining room where we'd shared our last meal. The study where I'd plotted and planned and manipulated. And finally, the back hallway. I stood at the top of the servants' staircase, and looked down at the spot where Margaret had died. I knelt on the hardwood floor, in the exact place where I'd found her body 6 months ago. The bloodstains were gone. Professionals had cleaned them away, but I could still see them. Would always see them. "I'm sorry," I whispered to the empty hallway. "Margaret, I'm so sorry." The words felt hollow, inadequate. Sorry doesn't bring back the dead. Sorry doesn't erase guilt. Sorry is just noise we make when there's nothing left to say. I met with Richard, my attorney, the next week. We finalized the will exactly as I'd planned. The estate, house, land, investments, would go to the Riverside Historical Society upon my death. But I added one more thing: a trust in Margaret's name, managed independently to support caregivers' rights and workplace safety. $200,000. More blood money. As if I could buy redemption one check at a time. Every Sunday, I visit Margaret's grave. I bring fresh flowers, usually roses, her favorite. I sit on the cold ground beside her headstone and talk to her. Tell her about the weather, the garden, the Historical Society's plans for the house. Apologize over and over until the words lose meaning. Her sister Patricia came once while I was there. We didn't speak, just knelt on opposite sides of the grave, 2 women destroyed by the same tragedy. People ask if I regret testifying against Robert. Acquaintances at the market, distant relatives, the woman at the post office who remembers when he was just a boy. "He's your son," they say, as if I could forget. "Don't you regret it?" I give them the answer I've practiced. I regret that it had to come to that. What I don't say is that I regret everything, that there isn't a single choice I made that doesn't haunt me, that regret is the only thing I have left. Clara filed for divorce before the trial even ended. She moved to Arizona or Nevada, somewhere far away where no one knows her as the woman who told her husband to do whatever it takes. I heard she remarried within a year, some wealthy older man who doesn't ask about her past. Good for her. She got away clean while Robert and I drown in the consequences of what we all did together. Robert writes me from prison. Letters arrive every few weeks, my name in his careful handwriting on the envelopes. I don't open them, don't read a single word. I take them straight to the fireplace and watch them burn. Sometimes I wonder what he's writing. Apologies? Accusations? Pleas for forgiveness? It doesn't matter. There are no words that could change anything now. We're both serving life sentences, his behind bars, mine in this house. Late at night, when sleep won't come, I sit in the study and ask myself the questions I can't escape. Did I want justice for Margaret? Or did I just need someone else punished for a crime we both committed? Was I protecting the innocent or protecting myself? Did I destroy my son because he was a murderer, or because he reminded me of what I'd become? I never find answers. Just more questions, darker and deeper, spiraling down into guilt that has no bottom. The house is silent now, always silent. I'll die here, I know that. Die in the house where Margaret was killed, where my son became a murderer, where I proved that mothers can be monsters too. Sometimes I walk that back hallway at night and feel her there, watching, judging. And sometimes I see Robert too, the boy he was before greed and desperation twisted him into something unrecognizable. I set a trap to catch betrayal and caught murder instead. Caught my own guilt. Caught the truth about what we're all capable of when we're desperate enough, scared enough, certain we're right. I open my safe one last time and look at the recording. Robert's confession I never turned in. I didn't need to destroy him with evidence. He destroyed himself. We all did. And now I live here, in this house of ghosts and blood and silence, waiting for death to finally bring judgment I can't escape. I set a trap. I whisper to the darkness, and we all fell in. They call me the victim, the mother who exposed her son's crime, the woman who sought justice for her murdered caregiver. But I know the truth. I am the architect of this tragedy, the woman who valued pride over prudence, proof over people, winning over wisdom. Margaret died because I put her in harm's way. Robert destroyed his life trying to steal mine, and I orchestrated it all while pretending to be the hero of my own story. This house remembers everything. And so do I, every night, every breath, every moment until the silence finally takes me too. If you enjoy this video, don't forget to like, share, and leave your thoughts in the comment section.